Hey, so glad you guys are coming on here. I'm gonna give a couple minutes for people just to hop on. This is a really exciting live that we're gonna be doing here today. It's all about how to survive a burnout crisis. So this is gonna be a little bit of an emergency guide for those of you who have really just been struggling with burnout and maybe don't have anyone to talk to about this with, or are just kind of struggling on your own. So I'm really excited because I think today is going to be just incredibly powerful for you. And I'm realizing my shirt here is all turned around. How embarrassing. I was like, wow. Ah, that's how you can tell I've been doing a lot today. It's actually been an incredible day. So I'm really glad you guys are joining. So we're starting here in just a minute. Now, if you're getting on, whether you're getting on like right now or whether you're getting on later and watching this video at a different time, we just leave a comment in wherever you're watching this, if it's on Facebook or YouTube, leave a comment, say hi, let me know you're here. Maybe give me a like. I'd love to see who's watching these and just hear a little bit some of your questions as well, because we're gonna have some time for questions as well. So that's gonna be in a few minutes here. Okay. It's 8 o'clock, and I want to dive in because I have so much good information to share with you guys today. I think this is going to be an incredibly powerful time for you. Now, I don't know what brought you here today, but I'm assuming it's because you might be wrestling or struggling with burnout, or maybe you feel like someone in your life is struggling with burnout and you're not really sure what to do about it, which, by the way, this is super typical. In a recent survey from Monster, they said that 69% of people in the United States, working adults, were dealing with burnout on some level. So the likelihood that you're dealing with burnout is really pretty high. There's a lot of people right now who are dealing with burnout, and most people don't have any language for how to talk about it. So, today, in the next about 15 or 20 minutes or so, I really want to help you get kind of like an emergency plan. Like, how do you survive a burnout? I want to help you build an emergency plan so that you can, if you're in burnout, really triage where you're at and also learn how to set the right type of boundaries that you need so that you can begin to work your way out of burnout. Burnout is something that is affecting so many people, but so many people don't have the language for it. And so a lot of people just feel stuck and they feel trapped. And the reality is that like burnout will affect your relationships, it'll perfect your or affect your performance, and this is going to have some major impacts on your life. It's going to cause you to eventually work less hours if you fully like burn out. It can also cause you to have more uncompleted projects because the more you get into burnout, the more brain fog you get and the less motivation you have to complete those projects. So it kind of compounds over time. It's like the snowball effect. It also, like, for people who are really burning out, it lowers your quality of work, and it also diminishes your problem solving abilities. So there's like these two parts of your brain that are really like engaged and battling it out when you're dealing with burnout. And so I kind of want to jump into this idea of like what's happening when you go into burnout before I give you this emergency guide, because this is one of the things that I learned along the way as I was dealing with burnout personally that really helped me was just understanding like what's happening on a brain level, in my body, like what in the brain is going on with me that is impacting this burnout in my life. And so you might be asking, like, why is it showing up and what can I do about it? And that's what I want to get into today. The first thing I want to share is that, when you're in burnout, it's really natural for you to go into like full on survival mode, like fight, flight, or freeze. Now, I don't know if you already knew what survival mode was, but there's a whole part of your brain dedicated to it. It's called the reptilian part of your brain. That's the reactive part of your brain. And so when people get into burnout mode, they literally go into survival mode. And the reptilian part of your brain is the survival mode part of your brain. It's the back part of your brain. That's why I keep pointing back here. It's back here. And that part of your brain is the most ancient part of your brain. It's the part of your brain that if someone released a lion into the room, that would tell your body to basically send all the blood to your legs so that you could run for your life. Or that, I mean, everyone responds differently. Some people might cower. That would be like a freeze reaction. Some people go into fight mode. Some people are going to grab whatever they have, their phone or whatever, and throw it at the lion, and they're going to go into fight mode. So some people go into fight mode, some people run, and some people freeze. But everyone does something. And what happens is when you're dealing with burnout, you're going into that survival mode part of your brain. And when you do that, what it does is it actually cuts off. There's another part of your brain called the amygdala. It's like in the middle of your brain. And the amygdala is like the threat detector part of your brain. And the amygdala, what it does is it cuts off access to the forward thinking planning part of your brain. They call this the prefrontal cortex, the forward thinking planning part of your brain. Now, the prefrontal cortex is so important because this is the part where you strategize. This is where language comes from. This is where problem solving comes from. So if you go into survival mode, the amygdala has the ability to basically like almost disconnect your brain. I like to say like it blows up the bridge between the reactive part of your brain and the forward thinking planning part of your brain, and it just cuts it off. It cuts off the part of your brain that can forward think and plan, which is why when we talk about the impacts of burnout, we talk about things such as you start you start having more uncompleted projects. Why? Well, it's really hard to complete a project when the forward thinking planning part of your brain is like shutting down. It's really hard to produce a high quality of work when you're under high stress and high duress for extended periods of time. It's really difficult to solve even simple problems that used to be really easy for you when your prefrontal cortex is shut down. So it's kind of fascinating, but this is what happens. We go into survival mode, fight, flight, or freeze. And then when we do that, we lose access to our prefrontal cortex. And burnout is when this is happening consistently over and over and over and over again. And as burnout begins to set in, all of these normal everyday things that you would do begin to start to impact you on a much higher level. So before, things that used to not even bother you, you could just disregard it. Now they begin to become things that really stress you out. You just can't handle as much because the level of exhaustion that's happening in your brain as it's trying to deal with fight, flight, or freeze when it knows it needs to get back to forward thinking planning, but it just can't quite get there. So that's what's happening on a brain level. Now, I have a good story to share actually about this, and it's a friend of mine. And this friend of mine called me because this person had watched one of my videos and just called me and was like, Hayes, I think I'm in burnout. Like, I watched your last video and I'm doing all of those things. I am doing those things, like literally, like I'm struggling to work my regular hours. I have all these uncompleted projects in my personal life and at work. My quality of work is going down, and it is harder than heck for me to solve problems that I normally would just have blown through. And now I'm just really struggling, and I'm realizing I don't even have the motivation to do anything about it. And so this person said, I'm basically dealing with burnout. And, I can't tell you how many people, educators, real estate agents, loan officers, business owners, moms that are in this place of just perpetual burnout, and you just don't know what to do. So I want to dive into really the kind of prescriptive side of what I wanted to share tonight, which is, what do you do if you're in a crisis? You're in a burnout crisis. Like, where do you start? So I want to give you some practical tools tonight to help you know where to start if you're dealing with a burnout crisis. So, number one is that you need to triage your situation. Obviously, everyone's stress factors are different, but what's not different is that you have stress. If you are a mom and you're also a business owner, you're running 20 different directions, plus you're driving your kids, plus you have all of the challenges of our economy that are hitting right now. If you're a real estate agent and the housing market's freezing up, or you're, a loan officer and things are beginning to tighten up, it's like if you're a business owner or a leader in an organization, people are counting on you, but there's all of these pressures. And what's not unique is that pressure exists. What is unique is your specific pressures. So the first thing you've got to do is you've got to triage your situation. And there's really three things that I want you to think about in a triage situation if you're dealing with a crisis. I mean, really, what a triage moment is it's a moment like where there's severe wounding or there's a severe catastrophic situation that's happening. And when that happens, what you want to do is you want to do your best to stop the bleeding as quick as possible. So, triage obviously is a medical word, and we hear it a lot around the idea of like war or battle. But sometimes life is hard and your world blows up, and you're like, I'm literally in survival mode, Aaron. I don't know where to start and I feel like I'm bleeding out everywhere. So when you go into triage mode, your goal is to stop the bleeding. So if you're in that place and you're like, I need to do something, Aaron, I just don't know where to start. Here's where to start. First thing is there's 3 steps to triage if you're in a burnout crisis. Number one, the number one thing you need to do to really triage your world is you need to make a list of the top 10 stressors that are causing you serious ongoing stress. The top 10. Now, you might have 50. I want you to pick the top 10. And what I want you to do is put them in order from the worst to the ones that aren't quite as bad. Now, they all might be really tough, but what I want you to do is just kind of put them in order. Which one's the worst? Make that number one. Like you want to put the ones at the top that if you could shift them, it would just alleviate the most stress. Whichever ones would alleviate the most stress, if you could fix them, put those ones at the top. So I want you to put those top 10 in order. Now, if you need burnout and you're stressed out, it is so hard to think straight that you just need to like verbally almost vomit. I've got this and this and this and this and this, and get a friend who um, pay them in coffee or something. Buy them like a bear claw. I don't know. I love bear claws. That would make me happy if you said I need to talk, but I'm going to buy you a bear claw so you can listen and just take notes. Have someone help you organize your top 10. But your goal is to get a top 10. Here's the second thing you do when you're triaging a burnout. So you're going to make your list, your top 10 list. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take the top 2 things that you think that you could move the needle on the fastest. Which are the top 2 things that would alleviate the most stress that you could take some kind of practical action on as quickly as possible? Now, I know a lot of you, because you're dealing with burnout, and I've been there, you get frozen with indecision. And you're like, yeah, but this and that and this and that. And you get your world is so complex to you, but you need to really take action on something. So the goal here is to take the top 2 and make an action plan. And what you've got to do is you can't wait for the perfect scenario to take the action. You just need to choose and take an action. The goal here is that movement is better than being frozen. So for some of you, there's areas in your life that are just sucking you dry. And they're mostly sucking you dry because you're frozen with indecision. Now, if you're in battle in war, they tell you like sometimes the worst thing you can do is stay put. You need to move. You need to continue to keep moving. And that's what you need to do in this case when it comes to triaging with burnout. Make that top 10 list, figure out the top 2 that you could move the needle on the fastest, and then make a decision and be willing to just go with it. It may not give you the perfect result, but at least it'll create some kind of movement that will alleviate some kind of pain. Here's the third thing you do to triage yourself if you're dealing with a burnout is you've got to call in support. Okay, so number 1 is make that list, that top 10 list. Number 2 is pick the top 2 things that you think you can create some movement on and take action. Number 3 is call in support, because a lot of us can't even take step number 2 without getting support because we're so overwhelmed, right? So when you're calling in support, you're really asking the question is, what can I delegate? Like literally, what can I hand off? Now, some of you are business owners. You might have some financial resources. And I would ask you is what can you delegate? And who can you pay to solve some of these problems? I have one friend who had a couple of rentals and it was completely stressing them out. And so they wanted to do something, but they were just overwhelmed by the task list. And they were like 90% of the way done getting these rentals ready, but that last 10% was killing them because they were burned out. Meanwhile, they had a family member who is incredibly good at finishing these types of projects and who loved to do it and had even asked and volunteered to be able to help, but who prior she didn't feel like she could necessarily hand it off at the moment. But now she's so burned out, she just needed to give it to someone. So it's like, hey, it's time. This is step 3. Call and support. What can you delegate? Hey, can you help me get these projects across the finish line? Most of us don't get to burnout on our own, and we definitely don't get out of burnout on our own. We've got to have support. So that might be hiring someone to help you if you can afford it, or if you can't, it might be calling a friend or a family member and saying, I could really use some help here. I mean, I was even thinking about, single moms who also might be working or who are business owners, and you're exhausted because you're driving your kids to school every day and you're having to pick them up, but that cuts your work day short. This would be a great time to find a girlfriend and say, can you help me pick up the kids 2 days a week? And those 2 days give you a couple extra hours that complete game changers in your stress level. So I just want to say this, is isolation's a total killer when it comes to burnout. It is a total killer. And getting to community is really where the path towards getting your life back is. And there's an ancient story about this actually. It was a verse in the Bible, that it says that the enemy kind of sneaks around like a roaring lion and he's seeking to steal and kill and destroy, this idea of Satan, And so I heard that verse and I've heard it a lot of times and I thought, whatever, that's kind of yeah, Satan's a bad guy, he's sneaking around. But then I watched this National Geographic one time and it was talking about how lions can kill elephants in 30 seconds. I'm like, how in the heck does a lion kill an elephant in 30 seconds? Well, the way lions work is they don't hunt alone. They hunt at night in the dark. And so what they do is they literally showed it on this National Geographic special. There's this herd of elephants and this pride of lions was hiding in these bushes all around these elephants, and all the lions started roaring from different directions, and you could see the elephants are like looking around, and you can feel there's nervous energy with the elephants. And then what happens is eventually one of the elephants breaks. It gets nervous enough because of all the stress and it panics and it runs. And what happens is when it runs, everyone else runs too because all the whole herd begins to panic. And then what the lions do is they will all jump on the weakest or the smallest elephant all together at the same time. And this is how life feels when you're going through burnout. It feels like 30 lions are on your back and you're just like, oh my gosh. But what the elephants do next is fascinating. What the elephants did next is eventually one of the big bull elephants, the ones with the big tusks, it figures out what's going on and it stops running and it begins to like literally blow and trumpet out. And as it trumpets out, all of the other elephants go to the one that's trumpeting and they literally back themselves up shoulder to shoulder with their tusks facing out and they all start trumpeting together. And the only chance for that elephant who has all of the lions on its back to survive is to run back to the community. And when it runs back to the community, it runs around the outside of that community, and the big bull elephants use their tusks and they rip the lions off its back. For a lot of us, we're going through burnout and we're like that one elephant that has 30 lions on its back. And you've got to get back to community. You've got to get back to community. It's one of the most powerful things that you need to do if you want to get through burnout. All right, now we're pushing just about 20 minutes here, and I want to get to the second thing that I wanted to share tonight, and then we're going to wrap it up, and I'm going to open up some time for questions. So if you're watching this live, I encourage you, like, hey, say hi, leave a comment below. If you're watching this later on Facebook or here on YouTube, leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. And I've got this channel. It's called the Reignite Podcast. that you can follow me on YouTube and hear more amazing content like this. I'd love it if you would subscribe or share this with your friends. I'm on a mission to help people just like you overcome burnout because I've been there. And burnout was one of the most scariest, scariest, like horrifying things I've ever went through because I got so afraid I was never going to get back to myself. And so I really hope this is giving you a lot of value. I also want to let you know that so whether you leave a comment now or later, I will come back and answer your questions. So if you have questions, even if you leave them on a different platform, I will come back and see those and I will respond to you. But I put a free resource here in the description. It's also in the comments that there's a free resource guide that's just there just to help you. And it also gives you access to a free 40-minute like webinar that you can watch and learn more about how you can really like get get a path out of burnout for your life. So just in case you guys are watching and this is powerful for you, please click on that link. It's going to be really powerful. So here's the second thing that I really want to dive into is the first thing you've got to triage, right? You've got to triage your burnout. You've got to make a list of the top 10. You've got to take the top two things you think you can take action on, and then you need to take an action. And then you need to phone a friend because a lot of times we need a friend to help us get over that hurdle. And our friends are the ones who are really going to help us. It takes a lot of humility, but those friendships and community are so important. That being said, there is a second main thing that you need to do if you're in a crisis, in a burnout crisis, and it's that you've got to create clear boundaries. You've got to create clear boundaries. So for a lot of people, home and work has become blurred because so many people are doing remote work, which means you're on your computer in your home working like I am. And for a lot of people, for some people, that's led to being lazy. But for most of us, responsible adults who have families, it hasn't led towards laziness. It's actually led towards higher levels of overwork. For other people, maybe you're just bringing your computer home at the end of the day, or maybe you have your phone and you're just never disconnecting from your phone. But what I'll tell you is this is when it comes to burnout, the lack of boundaries that you have over screens and work is having a significant impact on your brain. And your lack of transition from screens and stress is literally the thing that's causing you to carry stress all day long, all the way into your home. So for some of you, um, you're going through life and you can't figure out why you're stressed all the time when the reality is that you never give your brain a chance to rest. And so if that's you, you need to create some clear boundaries. So here's something that you can do instead. I mean, instead of having your phone and screens and never ever giving yourself space, there are three types of boundaries that you need to consider setting. The first one is time boundaries. Time boundaries. So, one thing that you can do, especially if you're working from home, is create some time blocks. An example, I work from 9 to 5 at home. And then at 5 o'clock, no matter where I'm at, I wrap up my calls, I wrap up my work, and I close my computer and I put my phone on do not disturb because that's family time or it's time for dinner, or I'm going to give myself a 2 hour break before I work a little bit more. Whatever it is, you want to block your time and you want to honor your time boundaries. A lot of people who are dealing with burnout are dealing with burnout because they don't honor their own boundaries. And so their brain can never, ever break out of that stress cycle because it doesn't know when you're going to apply the stress again. So if you have clear time blocking, what it does is it tells your brain, oh, I know at this time I can check out from this level of intensity. But so many of us are laying with our phones next to our bed, buzzing, beeping, responding to social media, and it never gives our brain a break. And really what that can be a lot of times is that time boundary. I need to set some limits where my brain has time to rest. Here's the second kind of boundary that you can set. It is a physical or behavioral boundary. So, this is when we remove ourselves from people or places that stress us out, or behaviors that stress us out. These are some of the most powerful boundaries. It's like when you have people, I'll take a teacher example for a minute. Sometimes the most unsafe place on a school campus is the teacher's lounge. Why? Because you go in there at lunch after having a stressful morning with kids, and teachers love kids, but it can still be pretty stressful. And you get into the lunchroom, and everyone is complaining. And every time you go in there, you're like you're feeling deflated. But then you go in there, and if you had any wind in your sails left, it all got sucked out, and maybe your ship got set on fire. And now you've got to do the rest of your day feeling negative because you hung out with people who are just gossiping or complaining the whole time. See, the problem with that is that when you're around those people, you become like those people. And so you want to limit and create space, physical boundaries. It might mean eating lunch in your room by yourself. It might be finding another teacher who's positive and not negative and eating lunch with them in your room. Whatever you want to do, you want to make sure that you have some physical or behavioral boundaries in place so that you don't keep tapping yourself dry. Um, Now, the behavioral boundaries might be more like, I'm not going to participate in gossiping or tearing other people down. I'm not going to participate in behaviors that act like the sky is falling and just offer complaints. I'm going to focus on solutions. Those are behavioral boundaries that, if you honor them, they help protect your brain so that you can stay safe from burnout. The third type of boundary that you can set is a mental boundary. It's like a brain break. You got to find ways to remove yourself and from the stress in your mind. So one of the most powerful ways to do this for me is that I will read before bed. So I'll take the last 30 or 45 minutes before bed. I put my phone away. I don't listen to music. I will just read a book that's interesting to me. And it gives me a mental break, a mental space where I am intentionally not doing things with screens. I'm not doing things with distractions. I'm just letting my brain just be free. Another thing I used to do is on my way home, I'd give myself transition time. It was just a mental uh, barrier. It was like a mental boundary, but I would stop around the corner from my house for 15 minutes just to give myself time to transition from work to home because I found I was finishing work, get in the car, take work calls all the way until I pulled into the driveway. I'm super stressed out, walk 15 feet to my door, and then walk into a crazy storm with my wife and kids and everyone and dinner and the dogs and all that insanity. But I gave myself no time to transition. So mentally, I was still in a place of stress. And then I brought that stress into my world. Okay. I have just shared so much with you guys. I tried to, I was going to keep this to 20 minutes and I'm almost to 30 minutes. So, my goal today was to help you, just to help share how to survive if you are in a burnout crisis. And I hope that this has been incredibly powerful for you. I just want to give a minute right now. If you have questions, I'm just going to take a drink of water here for a second. If you have questions, would you leave them in the comment box here? Like, leave a comment. And I've got a free resource here for you. Just check out the comments or look in the description. I'd love for you to grab onto that free resource, and it gives you access also to a 40-minute webinar. So there's a free PDF and a 40-minute webinar that are incredibly powerful to help you navigate burnout. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm just going to give a minute or so here and give you guys a chance if you want to ask a burning question. And I also just want to remind you, if you leave a comment later, I'll also come back and answer those later. That was a lot of talking. Okay. It doesn't look like I have any questions right now. But if you have a question, a burning question, maybe you're watching this later, just leave a comment. I'd love to come back and answer those questions and see if I can serve you and help you. I hope this has been a blessing to you guys. Have an amazing night. And I'm going to be doing more of these. So hopefully we'll get to talk again soon. Thanks again. And if you want to subscribe to my podcast, it's Reignite at Reignite Podcast. It's RE Ignite Podcast. and that's on YouTube. And I'd love to have you come and see. We're doing some amazing things, and there's some really powerful content there that will help you navigate burnout. So I hope to see you guys there. Have a great night.